Hello, welcome to the Flow Artists Podcast. My name is Ran Bowen. Now, before we start the show, I'd just like to ask you to please subscribe or give us a review in iTunes. It'll really help us promote the show. In this episode, I travel back to my hometown of New Plymouth and catch up with Alex Rodger, who runs the Yoga Space, a hot yoga studio right in the centre of town. Now, Alex has led an adventurous life, and he tells us how his journey has taken him travelling across the world from the north of England. We learn how he found yoga and meditation and how he felt drawn to creating a community right in the heart of New Plymouth, New Zealand. It's an incredible story, and he tells it very well. We recorded this conversation in his studio, and you might notice a bit of background noise during portions of this recording, for which I do apologise. And please stick around, Joe and I will return at the end for our picks of the week. Thanks for meeting with me, Alex. I was just wondering if you could just start by telling me a little bit about your background and perhaps where you grew up. I can detect a little bit of an accent there.
Yeah, definitely. It was my upbringing was in the north of England, very much an industrial part of England, but very close to some beautiful areas as well. We've got the Lake District up in the northwest, so it's quite close to the Scottish border, as you can probably tell by my accent. So it was brought up originally in Manchester, and so I spent about 10 years in Manchester and in bars and pubs. My mum and dad were publicans.
Right.
So I brought up in pubs and bars around Manchester, and my mum was actually from the town where I lived over there in the northwest, a place called Barrow-in-Furness, a very small little town, industrial town. But slowly worked my way from there and started spreading my wings and ended up touring around England and going to the Lake District, got into mountain biking, and I spent a lot of time in Manchester as well. I sort of went back and revisited Manchester because my parents split up, and I ended up moving back to my old hometown with my mum. And from there, just continued sort of spreading my wings. And from Manchester, then I was working in the shipyard for quite a few years, but I was always wanting to sort of break away from that. And I ended up getting made redundant from the shipyard along with another 6,000 people. Like the whole town basically just closed down in the space of 6 months, and all my friends were getting all this redundancy money, and we were slowly drinking it away as you do in a northern English town. And I just decided, right, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something, that I've been reading a book about working your way around the world. It's funny how I just heard it on a radio. So like I'd never met anybody who travelled, and I just heard it on a radio station, someone talking about this book, and I thought, that sounds interesting. So I got it from the library, and then I got this opportunity. All of a sudden I had a load of money, and so I decided, right, I'm going to do it. So I took a one-way flight to Bangkok. Wow. And that was the start of my travels. And so I travelled quite a few years, and I was sailing for quite a few years. I sailed from Central America to New Zealand. Mm-hmm. And I was pretty much just went where the wind blew, and I ended up in Whangarei, up in the north of New Zealand, and slowly worked my way south and discovered a bit of yoga on the way and a bit of meditation on the way, and so here I am in Taranaki.
Right. It sounds like a pretty adventurous life.
No, it was funny. My mum, when I was younger, even in her level, like she moved to Manchester when she was quite young, like 18 or something like that. So for her, moving from her small industrial town to Manchester, that was quite a big thing in her day,
Mm-hmm.
And then when we were kids, we used to go on camping tours around, Wales and the south of England. And she would always go try and find the roads with the grass up the middle, she'd always say,
Mm-hmm.
So she always was leading us to find that unbeaten path,
Yeah.
And I think as time went on, I've always been looking for that as well. I've been trying to find that path that maybe other people haven't been on, or get off the mainstream. So
Excellent. So you briefly mentioned discovering meditation and yoga in New Zealand. Would you like to go into that? How did you discover these practices?
Well, I've got quite a link with the ocean as well. Like another one of the drivers for coming to New Plymouth is the surf,
Mm-hmm.
and I discovered that when I was travelling and sailing, and So I really got quite a strong relationship with the ocean. I sailed across from the longest part of the trip when I sailed from Central America was from the Galapagos Islands to the French Polynesia, and that was a month at sea.
Wow.
So 30 days without seeing land, and I used to spend a lot of time on the bowsprit just watching the waves, you know, just rolling, and you know, and so obviously I found this headspace that was, you know, quite therapeutic. Like I hadn't talked to my father for years. I was saying my mum and dad were divorced when I was young, and I hadn't talked to my father for years, and I wrote him a letter while I was sailing, and you know, sort of rekindled that relationship with my father again. And so it was, it was a big thing for, you know. And then when I arrived in New Zealand, I met some people, you know, through surfing, and you know, I was telling one of them about this, you know, this state that I got into when I was sailing, you know, and he said, I know what you need, you know. He said you need to do a Vipassana course.
Right.
Yeah, and that's how I discovered Vipassana and meditation. That was really my first step on a spiritual path in a way. I guess when I was traveling there was some spiritual aspects to it, but yeah, no, that was what really sent me on this path. Yeah.
Right. So you found Vipassana. Did you have any key teachers or a key teacher at this time?
There was a guy called Paul White. I did my training in Australia around Noosa, and I was traveling through Australia surfing, and you know, I had a beaten up old wagon and sleeping on the beaches, and you know, just doing what you do and traveling around, and yeah, I ended up going to this Vipassana course, and Paul White was the teacher, and I remember seeing him sitting on the seat, and he was standing real strong, and he had a Rip Curl t-shirt on. And I was thinking, he could be a kindred spirit, you know, and so he was my first sort of meditation teacher, and he actually came over to New Zealand as well, and I sat a course when he was over here too. So yeah.
And so, starting with Vipassana meditation, when did you discover yoga specifically?
Well, it was a few years after I've been doing meditation, probably for about maybe 2 or 3 years after I've been doing meditation. I was living in West Auckland, and I used to go backwards and forwards to the Vipassana Centre quite often. You know, I found a place where I could go and gravitate to, and I'd spend weekends there. And one of my friends, he'd been over to Byron Bay, and he'd done a 3-month or an Iyengar course anyway, and he came over, and you know, he was into surfing, and we were into a bit of rock climbing as well. And he said, "Oh, you need to get into this surfing. It's just so, I mean, into this yoga. It's just so complimentary, you know." And I was also on that path as well, almost sort of dipping my toe into other spirituality, you know. And so yeah, it was just an extension of that, I guess.
And I guess you mentioned you surf and you skate and do a lot of these other physical activities, and I guess with this podcast we like to talk about getting into that flow state. Do you find that these are activities where you can get into that state just as well as yoga, or is there a difference for you?
Well, for me, you know, having that sort of basis in meditation, it's all about the breath, you know, and I think that, yeah, my style of yoga is very much a vinyasa, you know, just really working with that rhythm of the breath. And I also, you know, you find that when you're out in the surf as well, you know, it sort of crosses over, that you're sitting there and you're watching the waves, and you see these big sets looming on the horizon, and you realise, right, just calm your breath, just come back to the breath, you know. And yeah, so it's not the same as in the rhythm of the breath, but it's definitely a breath awareness is a big part of it too, sure.
Actually, it sounds like your friends that you were travelling around the country with were sort of quite accepting of yoga, or did you get any stick from people at various points during your journey?
No, not so much here, you know. I know if it had been in the north of England, you know, like I actually had a friend come over from the north of England and just complete my training, and he's a very rounded sort of person, very sort of introvert, you know, and so I chopped him up with some bolsters and blocks and was showing him, you know, to get into Baddha and to open his shoulders, you know, and when he went back to the UK, I know that he'd been telling my friends, you know, because he rang me up after a little while and said, "Look, if any of your mates or any of our mates say anything about what I said about you, I wasn't being, you know. I thought, right, so obviously you were being, you know, telling tales about what I was doing over here. But no. But my friends here, they were very much on that sort of path as well, you know. Like one of my friends was into Krishna consciousness, you know, and so we were all sort of dabbling in that a little bit as well. And a lot of them had done Vipassana courses as well. So it was a really good sort of bunch. Yeah.
Cool. And just to backtrack a little bit, with yoga and meditation, do you actually find that your practice of it sort of enhances these other activities that you do, the skating, the surfing, and the...
Yeah, you know, meditation, when you've got a regular practice, it just gets you into that flow of life, you know. It's just that you just sort of get swept along, you know, and it seems to be that you don't have those same struggles. Maybe you do, but just with having the practice, it just feels as if they don't affect you the same as you would without them, you know. So definitely, I find when I'm meditating regularly, when I've got a real regular, strong practice, everything just seems to happen and life just flows. Yeah, and the same with the yoga and the surfing as well, you know. Yeah, it definitely flows,
Yeah, nice. So you say that life just flows, and I guess you managed to flow towards New Plymouth, towards the wonderful surf area. What was that process like, and how long ago was that?
Been here, like, I'm not very good with years, but I've been here... we call it pre and post samurai. I think. Remember when Tom Cruise and all the circus was in town? It was that summer when I first came here. I think it was 2002 or something. So 15 years ago or something. Yeah.
As we mentioned, it was the surf that drew you here. Was it much of a process sort of setting up shop or just establishing yourself here?
Well, I've got my industrial background. I'm an electrician as well.
Right.
So that's my kind of mainstay. And so I was working on super yachts up in Auckland, and then a company down here was building super yachts. So it was funny. There was one of the guys was an owner's rep who was working at the shipyard in Auckland and also on the shipyard down here. And I said to him, "Can you see the surf from the factory?" And he said, "Actually, if you stand on the bowsprit and look out through the doors of the construction hall, you can see waves break." I said, "Right, get me a form, application form, I'm coming." So that was the real catalyst for coming down here, was knowing that I could come down for the work, and you know, but also having visited here lots of times, I knew exactly what it was like, you know. So yeah.
When did you decide you wanted to start teaching yoga?
That's interesting. I had a teacher when I first came to New Plymouth, and she was, you know, she's an amazing individual, Eileen Pennington. She must be over 70 now. She must probably mid-70s. She'll never tell you how old she is, you know, but she was about 60 at that time, you know, and she'd been through IYTA, and I was, you know, just like I am with everything, just full on with yoga, so I would be at all her classes, and it's just, I don't know, for me, it's just, you got to be all you can be, you know, and that was just an extension of that. You know, if I'm going to do yoga, why don't I throw myself into it? So I did the IYTA training, and I was assisting her with teaching out the coast, out towards where all the surf breaks are. And so I was assisting her with teaching, and it was just part of that process.
And then when did you decide that you wanted to set up your own studio?
Yeah, well, when I completed my training, which was a few years ago now, it was probably about 10 years ago, I always said I want to start up like a yoga community, you know. I want to start up a community centre for yogas, you know, and it's sort of become like that, you know, like when I wanted to set this place up, I invited lots of teachers, and we went through that whole process, but it became very much apparent that people weren't maybe quite as interested in starting a yoga studio as I was. So, you know, they didn't want that commitment. So I just sort of opened the studio, and it's still quite a community-oriented place. You know, like we've got 6 teachers, you know, we've got a lady who does all the mind-body side of it all, you know, we've got another lady who does all the advertising. I'm really just kind of that person in the middle, you know, like obviously a lot of the ideas and, you know, things that we want to do, like we've got Movember coming up and things like that, you know, like they're instigated by me, but yeah, it's a big group of us that are really running the studio. I'm still out doing my electrical work every day, you know, and so I just on the phone talking to, you know, all the people that help me to run the studio, and they just come and do what they do.
Yeah. Speaking of community, was it very difficult to start with actually sort of building or establishing a community, or did it just sort of fall into place?
Yeah, well, I've been teaching by the time I started up the studio, I've been teaching for a fair few years by then anyway, probably maybe 7 or 8 years or something like that, but I've been mostly to surfers. I used to teach yoga for surfers at the Board Riders Club in Fitzroy, which is about 10-15 minutes from here, and I'd done a couple of Bikram classes, and I'd done some hot yoga classes, and at the Board Riders Club in the winter we used to close all the doors, put the heat pump on, and, you know, we would all be sweating, and we used to go for a meal afterwards. We always go to, there's an little Indian restaurant around the corner, and they had $10 curries on a Tuesday night, so we'd end up with more people coming to the curry on a Tuesday night sometime you would have in the class. You know, it created this kind of, you know, this culture around where some people wouldn't turn up for the class. You'd see them running past going for a surf, and they'd come to eat at the end, right? So yeah, and it was that same community. A lot of those people have crossed over, and, you know, the now students here. But we were always trying to build community, you know, like it's still quite hard, you know, like I still find that people come and they do their practice and they're here, and then they've got their sort of routine, you know, and sometimes quite hard to get them to do something different, you know, like, so in a way we do have our community. That engagement is a big thing that I'm still working towards, you know, like getting people more involved, so that, like, we've also got, we do the 108 sun salutations, so we're doing that at the beginning of December in the park, and that's really good because we get all the studios involved, and we all, you know, and we have a big, so that's really great. That's the culture that I want to start doing that every year, you know, so that things around that like that, you know.
New Plymouth is a relatively small town, about less than 50,000 people, and it does seem to have quite a few yoga studios. I was just talking with you about this before. As I mentioned, I moved away for a few years, and just coming back, there just seems to be so much yoga here. Do you have any idea why that might be?
Yeah, there was quite an explosion of it, just, you know, maybe, well, just after we sort of got our studio established, yeah, there was a few more open just after that. But I think the mountain, Taranaki, you know, we got this big, beautiful mountain here, and it does sort of draw a certain type of people as well. There's a lot of art in New Plymouth, you know, there's a lot of culture around the Maori culture, and, you know, a lot of that's intertwined with people's day-to-day, you know, and I think just that spirituality and being in touch with nature, you know, there's a lot of people, you know, when they're not doing yoga, they're surfing, you know, or they're tramping, they're snowboarding, you know. So I think just that being in touch with nature and just finding that kind of connection is something that sort of appeals to people with yoga as well.
Do you ever feel sort of a pressure to live a perfect yogic lifestyle being a teacher here?
Yeah, not really. I'm very much aware of my heart on my sleeve. You know, what you see is what you get, you know, and that's the same with the studio. That's like our ethic as well, you know. We're just people, you know. Like, I've had this thing bouncing around in my head just lately, like down to earth yoga, you know. That's what we are, you know. We're warts and all, you know. But at the same time, you know, we're a nurturing bunch as well, you know. So I don't feel like, I haven't drank since I started Vipassana, so I haven't been drinking for 15 years, you know, probably over that now, and the same, you know, it's not as if I'm doing it because I do yoga, I found that is part of my path, and that's what works for me, but I won't force it on anybody else. Some of the other teachers, they'll go and have a wine on a Monday afternoon and meet up and have a pizza, you know, like we're all different, you know.
How do you find introducing sort of yogic philosophy into your classes, or do you incorporate much of that?
I do, not so much, you know. I do little bits and pieces, but say we're sort of quite a down-to-earth kind of studio. So in a lot of ways, like, we have the Taranaki rugby team coming in here, you know, like we try to. Well, we are just a real sort of grassroots, down-to-earth kind of studio. So we don't, Like you won't see any Buddhas around the place. You won't see any, we've got quotes, but it depends on who's writing the quote up there, what kind of quote you're going to get, Something might be from Monty Python, you might get up there one day, We're kind of quite quirky, And so, but at the same time, having that depth in meditation, like I am able to lend advice for people, if they're struggling or, just impart some, but as far as sort of yogic text and that kind of thing, I'm not, I have explored it, as part of my studies and everything, but don't bring it into the classes.
Fair enough. I was just sort of wondering, with that sort of stuff, like, do you encounter resistance, or
it took me years to say namaste. I say it now, at the end of class, and sometimes I'll almost be in tears, that, because what it means for me now, but it was like that process, I would never just say something just for the sake of saying it and just not feel it, it's got to come from a place that, that has actually grown within me to feel that, and I just felt at the end of the class there was something missing, like I'd look out and everybody were, we had such a great class and we'd all had this community feeling together, we'd all been a part of something, but there was no way of ending it. So I brought in Namaste because it was just like, obviously we've had this real great experience between us, and I just want to acknowledge that, and so that's how it came about.
Is there a challenge in finding a balance between creating this successful business that works and your family life and your own practice? How do you balance all these things?
Yeah, well, I'm an early riser, which is good.
Helps with the surfing,
Well, that was a big part of it, like one of the big reasons for stopping drinking, as well as the spiritual side of it, was because I would miss too many dawn surfs, So I would be with my friends and they'd all be lying in bed still, and I'd be out catching the best waves of the day first thing in the morning, and I've got 3 kids too, so working with that, say with the studio, I'm not so involved that I can't, that people just can come and teach their own classes, and so that's really good, and I teach between 2 and 4 classes a week, depending on the week. Sometimes if we have problems with staff or whatever, I might have to take up to 6 classes a week, but just about every night of the week I'm at home. I start early in the mornings doing my practice or whatever I need to do. Sometimes it'll be paperwork for my business, sometimes it'll be practice, and most days I'll get to make my kids breakfast and get them packed up for school and drop them at school, and still, then go out to work in the morning. So it is a bit of a juggling act, but
So how do you feel that your teaching has evolved since you first began teaching?
It's definitely evolved as far as the vinyasa, when I first started teaching yoga, vinyasa was not really, especially the scene in New Plymouth, it was very much Iyengar, staunch Iyengar kind of culture, and I was a big part of that, and even when there was an Ashtanga studio moved into town, and I was very much Iyengar, Ashtanga, and it wasn't until I started doing my studies, and because with Iyengar it was always missing from me that connection with breath, it was just like the breath was always a separate practice, it was like pranayama, and then you come to the practice and the two wouldn't meet, and I always used to find that quite strange, but I didn't know enough about Ashtanga at the time, knowing that was definitely a vinyasa style, but I was very much still in that sort of Iyengar mindset. But it's developed with the breath over time, and so now my classes are very much a flowing class, which is all about the breath. And say in the class, I like to bring fun and quite sort of quirky, say, as a studio, but I find sometimes it's really inappropriate. I've realised that now. Like once off when I was teaching the Board Riders Club, I could make jokes and that within the class, but now, you create this space and people are in this space and they're in the moment, and I look around and I can't drop in what I feel like saying at this moment in time or whatever, because I don't want to disturb that kind of space that you've created for the students. So Yeah, I would say that's probably one thing. Holding the space is definitely, become more a part of my teaching style. Yeah, the vinyasa, moving with the music, I incorporate music a lot more into my classes now, and I work quite hard with playlists sometimes on creating that. But I do want to teach. I want to study more. That's definitely where I want to go. Like now I've got the studio and I've got my electrical business, but I'm slowly trying to work away from the electrical business and put more energy and time into the studio and develop my teaching as well. So yeah.
And do you feel that your personal practice has evolved over time?
Yeah, well, it's my personal practice these days is a lot of I really like Duncan Peak and power living, that whole concept. There's very much a surfer, and sort of that gym crossover was what I was really into for a long time, especially in New Plymouth, because when I first started there was a lot of gyms and no yoga studio. There was one very traditional yoga studio, a few little small clusters, but to sort of take it to that next level, I really needed to latch onto something. So I really tried to get that crossover between the gyms, and so power living and Duncan Peak was a very much a kind of a benchmark that I was looking at to create the studio. So I still really love that style, and I really love Duncan Peak's teaching. I've seen him at Wanderlust, and yeah, I really just gravitated towards him. A bit of man love.
Bit of bromance.
Yeah, I think everybody. I said this to a girl. I said, "Oh no, I've just fallen up," and she goes, "Everybody does." She said, "Yeah." So that is the kind of the model that we've kind of been following, but we're slowly working away from that. But I still do a lot of his practice. Online. I've got the power living, and subscribe to power living, so I follow a lot of that and take a lot of elements of that into my classes. So yeah, and, it depends on the time and how much time I've got to myself. I've been exploring some other practices as well, theta healing. So I've been doing quite a bit of that too. So, and I find that's a lot more instantaneous. You can do the same, well, not the same, but you get a similar kind of effects from meditating as you do from theta healing. I can do that anywhere, Same with the breathing, with Vipassana. You can always come back to the breath, but sometimes it just seems a lot quicker to work with theta healing, to ground yourself and to find that place of peace. So yeah, I've been using that a bit as well.
So what do you feel your biggest challenges are as a teacher or as a business owner?
Yeah, at the moment is trying to go from one to the other now, tilting that balance across, especially with family, and anybody who opens a studio knows the financial sort of setting up any new business is always a big thing, So financially, that's the biggest challenge. We're coming out of it now, we're 3 years in, so I'm getting a little bit more settled with that kind. I would say, the business side of the studio and keeping the balance of the two, trying not to bite off too much. Like at first when I opened the studio, I was spending a lot of time with the studio and sort of neglecting my other business a little bit. So now it's swung back again, but now it's sort of like, right, now I need to find that balance between, not neglecting the yoga studio. So that's probably my biggest challenge, is making them both work financially.
Have you got any suggestions or advice for new teachers or people considering becoming yoga teachers?
Yeah, I think probably just to build up your classes in a smaller scale to begin with. Like it's real easy to find a sort of cliche, but find your tribe, find those people that are into what you're into and just sort of bring them in, and whether it's being when you're at work or just being who you are and talking about your yoga, people just tend to sort of gravitate towards it, if they're ready to hear what you have to say, though. And then it's just you slowly start to build those connections with people. And to say, I've still got, there's one lady the other day, or one of our Karma Yogi cleaners, she was one of my very first students when I was teaching down the course in Okato, so that was 10 years ago, and I haven't really been teaching, I haven't taught another class with her for probably about 8-9 years. And we put a shout out looking for Karma Yogis to clean the studio. We have 3 Karma Yogis coming and looking after the studio. And so she rocked into the class. I hadn't seen her for nearly 10 years, and so she's now part of the studio again. And she's always, she said, I've always gravitated towards your style. So financially she wasn't able to afford it, but now she can come along. And yeah, you know, those people are always there, you know, and just they'll come in, they'll go out of your life.
Have you got any advice for teachers planning to open their own studios?
Don't do it like I did. No. I very much, you know, I just throw myself into things with reckless abandon. It's just who I am and what I'm like, you know.
Sometimes that's how things get done, though.
Yeah, that's right. People who would be planning a business would, you know, have projections of, you know, what it's going to look like, you know, and we did a very rudimentary business plan. But I think, yeah, to open a studio, finding your tribe first of all, so almost creating your market and creating your clientele before you take it to the next level. I think I was just at that level as well, you know, like this, where I was teaching the classes at the Board Riders Club, sometimes we'd have to open the doors and get people out on the deck because we were filling the space. It was in these brainstorming sessions in the Indian restaurant after the classes, you know, we'd have a few people there, and we said, look, we could do with a bigger space that would work for us more, you know, rather than carting all the gear around all the time. And one of those people was Imogen. She was a girl who's been with us since those early days in the Board Riders. She came through and was very supportive about opening the studio, and then she was sort of working, called herself the creative coordinator of the studio. There's no way she was going to be a receptionist. She was a creative coordinator. She's an actress. And so she sort of was all the quirky bits, you know, like she was a big part of it, you know, and a few other people there helped me with business plans. So it was sort of like we all did it together in a way. She's actually just done her teacher training, and she's now gone back to the UK to get some experience in the UK. So yeah, so I think that's a big part of it, is finding those people that are going to help you, who want to come with you on your journey, you know, like we're all on this journey together. I think that was a big part of it. For me, opening the studio wasn't so much about creating a business. It was doing something that I wanted to do and having the people with me to do it with you. I would say that's an important part of it, is to, you know, you can, starting your businesses, you can feel very much alone as it is. Quite a, you know, you're the one, it's all on your shoulders. But if you've got those people there with you who are helping you along, you know, you've always got somebody there to share ideas with and thoughts with. And yeah, so I think that's an important aspect as well.
So you spoke a while back about coming up with playlists for your classes. Do you have a particular process that you use when you're setting up a musical selection, or
Spotify?
Nice.
Yeah, well, often it happens just I hear a song or, you know, a track that will appeal to me, and then things like Spotify are just so good, you know, you start from that one song and you can just discover so much music, so many genres. So that's how a lot of my playlists, like a lot of the music, I find a certain type of genre work, like trip hop. I find that trip hop has a really good rhythm for yoga and vinyasa. So trip hop is definitely high on my list of when I'm looking for music. But you know, I'm really into devotional music as well. You know, so over the years, like we have the WOMAD Festival in New Plymouth. You know, and so when I travel and stuff, found a lot of music. So that devotional music as well, you know, I just love all that too. And yeah, so I try to bring all aspects of that into the class as well, you know. Yeah.
Do you have classes where you will sort of try and set a particular mood?
Yeah, it just depends. Like sometimes I look out of the class, and you know, if I know it's going to be a class where I know everybody's face and the regular practitioners, then I can pump it up a little bit more, you know, and increase the pace a bit more. Or if I see that there's people who maybe haven't practiced in the class before, you know, just sort of take a little bit slower. But at the same token, you know, my classes are dynamic, and we sort of advertise the classes that as well. We've got different levels, so we've got like beginners levels, level 1, level 2, you know, and so people sort of know that if they come into this class, it's a 1.5 hour class, and it's going to be a bit more dynamic, you know. So we definitely are working on sort of directing people through from the beginners and slowly nurturing them through, you know.
And you mentioned also earlier that you want to do get some more study in. Are there any particular trainings that you're really looking forward to, or anything in particular you really want to dig into a bit deeper?
Yeah, there's a guy, Les Leventhal.
Les Leventhal.
Yes, yeah. I saw him at Wanderlust a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I really loved his teaching. I really gravitated towards him because he works a lot with that mantra and stuff in the classes, as well as having us all in the. I think he had us in Half Moon all singing Barbra Streisand. You know, I will always love you. You know, we were all, everybody was fully in the pose, and we were all singing at the top of our lungs. So. Yeah, he was really entertaining, but his classes was quite full on, real vinyasa style, and yeah, he really moved me as well, like I got into areas of my body which I hadn't explored for teaching, it's not often you get to really sort of get deep, but he was a great teacher, so I would like to do some training with him, and his background as well, like from where he came from, alcoholic, and, just really, really tough sort of road to get where he is, and you just see him, he's, just such a beautiful man, and just very nurturing, and so I'd like to do some training with him.
Excellent. Yeah, I went to one of his workshops at Bali Spirit Festival a few years ago, and that was fantastic.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, as far as what's going on in the studio, we say we've got the 108 sun salutations coming up at the start of December, but something that's quite exciting that we were sort of involved last year. There's a festival called Summer Breeze, and it's quite a small festival, 100 tickets last year, and it was a music festival, but we were invited. It's a friend of mine who runs the festival, invited to come and do some yoga sessions as part of the festival. So we do a lot of our classes to music and things. So we did some classes. We did some sort of more restorative classes early morning, and people really loved it. And he's a musician as well. He does electronic music, some quite obscure music as well, he uses like this kind of mouth harp organ kind of thing, that he plays, and lots of samples as well. So we've done we did a class here a couple of weeks ago, and they played live for the class.
Wow.
So we're doing that crossover. So we're going to have a festival. There's going to be the Summer Breeze with the yoga spaces, the sort of helping, and being involved. But now we're going to have one with the yoga space with the Summer Breeze, and as a second, they're going to be supporting us. So. Yeah, and that's going to be great. Like, I'm really looking forward to that, because one of the feedback was that the people who are doing yoga were saying, the music went on too late, and then I had to get up for yoga in the morning, so we're going to make this one drug and alcohol free, and it's going to be a lot more of the focus on yoga, but also with the music as well, integrating with my friend's play cycle, and we're also going to get the Hare Krishnas are going to come up the Bhakti Lounge from Wellington.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've had quite a good relationship with them over the years. One of their devotees was one of the teachers here for a few years, and so they used to come up and do Kiya Time here. And when I go down there, I stayed with them for a couple of days last time I was down there. So I invited them to be part of the festival. So they're gonna come up, and they're gonna be providing food, the prasad, and they're gonna be doing a Kirtan. So the big event on the Saturday night will be a Kirtan with them. We're going to have talks and workshops, and with our own students in the studio. We're going to have acro yoga and partner yoga, and so I'm really looking forward to that. So that's really exciting for us.
When's that?
That's going to be the end of January, so I think it's like the 21st or the 22nd of January. Excellent. But we're going to launch it all when we do the 108th Sun Salutation at the start of December. We're going to put out early bird tickets then for the festival. So
excellent. I'll put I can put links for these in the show notes. So.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, that would be cool.
Excellent. I think that's all the questions I had for you today. Thanks very much for your time, and I'm really looking forward to doing your class with you in probably about half an hour, I guess. Yeah,
that would be great. No, thanks very much for coming along, and thanks for coming and seeing the studio and finding out what we're all about.
Joe and I are here for our picks of the week. Now, my pick of the week is the book Made to Last by Vanessa Murray. It's a sturdy, well-designed, beautiful book, and just from what it says on the back cover, in a world full of mass-produced disposable goods, there is a movement focused on sourcing unique and durable products that reflect true craftsmanship. Made to Last is a celebration of these products and the tradespeople behind their creation. Some products have been made by hand, others with cutting-edge technology, yet each has been designed and crafted with care. So I can't wait to get stuck into this book, and it's written by a friend of ours, so we're really happy to have it. Joe?
Oh, just another thing I want to add about that book. Sometimes design and craft books can be quite girly in focus, but this is like a really diverse range of different artisans. There's like a bamboo bike maker, a tattoo artist, a vinyl record maker. So it's like a really interesting mix of different handmade items, which I think really sets it apart. My pick of the week is one of my favourite people, Miss Donna Sparks, who's actually going to be coming on our podcast in a couple of weeks, is running a fabulous workshop called Hoop My Boogie. It's really fun, and it's a really great place to start if you haven't hula hooped before, because Donna will get right to the heart of what makes hooping awesome. So the fun and the flow and the creativity, but she'll just introduce some simple moves and then kind of guide you through. And there's like DJ kind of playing music live and vibing off Donna. It's at 24 Moons Bar, which is in Northcote, coming up on December the 16th at 3 p.m. And we'll put in the link if you want to book yourselves in. I would highly recommend it, especially if you've been kind of wanting to try hooping and feeling not sure where to begin. This would be a great place to start, and a great place if you've just been hooping for ages and need a little bit more inspiration in your flow.
Fantastic. So thanks, people. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to us at podcast.flowartist.com, or you can email us at podcast@flowartist.com. We're Flow Artist Podcast on Facebook or at Flow Artist on Twitter. Please come and say hello. The theme song in this podcast is Baby Robots by Ghost Soul, and used with much appreciated permission. Do yourself a favour and get his music from ghostsoul.bandcamp.com. Thanks again. Big, big love.
So long as we were incurious and obedient, I imagine, we could console ourselves with our importance and